Welcome all. Before we start, I'd like for you to please pick your preferred language. Take a look at the top left of your screen and you can click on the tab that's relevant to you so you can listen to your preferred language. Sawubona, Jambo, Ekabo, Salam Alaikum, Bonjour and hello. Welcome to the African Transformation Forum 2021. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, and distinguished guests, I'm delighted to welcome you to the annual ATF. This is the third edition. It's happening virtually, but really happy that we could all get together on this platform. It's hosted by the African Center for Economic Transformation with support from the MasterCard Foundation, German Corporation, Government of the Netherlands, Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, and Open Society Foundations. My name is Eleni Jokos. I'm an anchor and correspondent for CNN International. Now more than ever, economic transformation that is inclusive and propels change across all levels, from governmental to business, that will impact lives positively across Africa, requires commitment by all stakeholders as we navigate the impact of the pandemic. One where many African countries are still very much in the eye of the storm. Recovery paths have been shaken, growth prospects revised, and uncertainty is high. But just like other crises where Africa has come out stronger, we must show resilience and use all our resources available to counter these effects. CEOs and leaders have rallied together to find solutions. We've seen the rise in manufacturing capacity because of global supply chain disruptions. African businesses have innovated and have adapted. It's a testament to the enormous potential when we look closer to home for solutions. And as we advance towards the most exciting single market in the world, we have so much to look forward to, but there is also much work ahead, and we must look beyond trade to accelerate the continent's transformation agenda. The Continental Free Trade Area has the potential to help pull Africa into a new era of prosperity. So we will be hearing from decision makers, our thought leaders, and the next generation of leaders who are ready for this task. So we start by hearing from our leaders. Before we launch the third annual African Transformation Report, the theme this year is integrating to transform. We also have high-level panel discussions with incredible guests, and we also have very special messages from our new generation of leaders and entrepreneurs that put social issues at the heart and the heart of their strategies and their business models. So first, I'd like to welcome the ACET founder and president, Dr. KY Amoako. He is the former executive secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa. His career began in 1974 at the World Bank, moving to the UN, and then founded ACET in 2008. His book, Know the Beginning Well, an inside journey through 5 decades of African development, was published last year. Dr. KY has dedicated his life to solving the development challenges of the world's poorest countries, especially in Africa. Dr. KY, great to be on this platform with you.
Dear friends and colleagues, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2021 African Transformation Forum. On behalf of the African Center for Economic Transformation, thank you for joining us. We have had to adjust this year, obviously, but I am delighted nonetheless that technology, an important topic we will hear more about today, enables us to still come together from all corners of the world. We have a full agenda with one main focus: Africa's future and what it will take to ensure sustainable growth and transformation, not just in the aftermath of COVID-19, but over the long haul. That topic is front and center at ACET. It drives everything we do and is the focus of our new African Transformation Report. It is titled Integrating to Transform. We are proud to launch it today and share it with you. Integrating to Transform explores the critical need for African countries to increase collaboration and work together across borders to tackle shared challenges, harness regional opportunities, and enable economies to scale, and in turn, accelerate Africa's economic transformation. Despite the serious challenges and economic uncertainties facing Africa right now, we are in a unique moment. Regional integration has long eluded our continent, but we are seeing progress. The African Continental Free Trade Area has come into effect this year, for example, and it offers a pathway for countries to advance integration beyond trade and markets. Present Pan-African issues such as jobs and education, digital connectivity, climate change, infrastructure and energy need to be addressed in a collaborative way, not just by countries working in isolation. Over the past year, we have seen the positive impact of governments working together as African leaders responded boldly to the pandemic to save lives. We see an opportunity for a similar approach, guided by visionary leadership to enable transformative growth. Over the next 2 hours, you have an opportunity to hear from and engage with key decision makers on all these topics and more. I'd like to draw special attention to our two group discussions. The first will explore in greater detail the main themes of our report. I am thrilled the session will feature a few members of the Transformation Leadership Panel, including the panel's chair, Her Excellency Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. ACET established the panel in 2019, following the previous year's African Transformation Forum. You'll hear more about the panel from Madam Johnson Sirleaf and our other excellent guests. The second discussion will feature the issue of leadership across all levels, government, business, civil society, as a prerequisite for better collaboration and integration. I would like to thank the guests who will participate in that session, especially the Honorable Sulemani Diarra Soba, the Minister of Trade and Industry for the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire. Finally, please allow me to offer my deepest appreciation and gratitude to His Excellency the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, Mahamudu Bawumia, for delivering our keynote address, just as he did at the 2018 forum. Once again, thank you all for being here. I trust you find it rich, rewarding, and motivating. That's enough for me. Now, let's get on with it.
You'd think I would have learned about the mute button. Well, you know, someone had to go first, I think. I'm honored to welcome not only a man who I've had the privilege of interviewing many times in my career, but also my finance minister, the South African finance minister, and the board chair of ACET, Honorable Tito Mboweni. He was the first Black governor of the South African Reserve Bank and the Minister of Labor in President Nelson Mandela's cabinet. He has also served as the chairman of various companies. Honorable Minister, so good to see you, and thank you so much for making the time to join us today.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. Indeed, I've known you for many years. In your youth, when you were still thinking that you could change everything in one day. A warm welcome to everyone who has joined us for this African Transformation Forum 2021. Thank you very much to KY for his opening remarks, always to the point and very clear and understandable. I've been closely involved with the African Center for Economic Transformation for a couple of years now. I'm very happy that I've served as the chairperson of the board of directors of the African Center for Economic Transformation. And this has been a most wonderful experience. The ACET, like all business organizations, institutes, and even academic organizations, has had to quickly adapt to the suddenly changing world that we faced. I want to commend KY and his team, including Vice President Mavis Owusu Kamfi and COO Daniel Nt, for the steady hand which they've exercised over our organization. They have made it very clear that we have to trudge on with the work of this organization in the interest of Africa and all humanity. It has been very difficult from time to time as we've faced many financial challenges. And we thank all our friends who have always stood by us as we trudge on in providing the intellectual capacity and support for the transformation of Africa. As KY has mentioned on many occasions, it is us Africans who are going to lead the intellectual trajectory for the transformation of our continent. But we do so not in a narrow Africanist fashion, but we also invite friends from around the world who think like us and who want to support us in this quest for African development to join hands. And there have been many, as you can see from the supporters who have come to this meeting this time. We are facing a very difficult situation in Africa at the moment. The COVID-19 situation is a very painful experience for us. COVID-19 is ravaging through Africa. Rich countries are hoarding the vaccines for their own citizens, and our own countries in Africa are suffering from the shortage of the vaccine. And therefore, I must take this opportunity to thank the work that's being done by the African Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the Export Credit Agency, and the African Development Bank and others for all they're doing to ensure that African countries do receive the vaccines required. But more importantly, and this is what KY would like, more importantly, as Africans, let's begin to produce the vaccines ourselves. Let us not be the pity of the world forever. Let us not be the beggars who beg the developed countries for vaccines forever. Let Makerere University, University of Cape Town, University of Pretoria start the process of producing the vaccines for our people. I'm afraid that I would not be able to spend the rest of the day with you as I am caught up in a number of cabinet committee meetings which are trying to discuss and finalize decisions on the crisis which has just suddenly erupted in South Africa, where we've seen massive looting and destruction of property, things which as African intellectuals we know would happen from time to time if certain things are not done. And therefore I'll be coming in and out of the meeting to attend those other meetings where I'm required to be present as Minister of Finance. Let me assure those who are joining us for the first time in this African Transformation Forum. This forum offers one of the most useful, innovative, and insightful occasions in African intellectual experience. We also offer various possible policy approaches which could be followed. we do not impose ourselves on everybody or on anybody, but we provide what might be useful in the thinking process through the African Transformation Report. I therefore, once again, welcome everybody. Thank the chair of our panel, the former president of Liberia, for working with us on this journey. Thank KY and everybody for their efforts. And once again, welcome to this forum and welcome to this launch. Thank you very much indeed. And greetings from South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, and so good to see you. And I know you're busy and I know you have a lot of responsibility. It would be remiss of me not to ask you, though, if you're worried about this situation impacting economic recovery in South Africa. I know you have a lot of work ahead of you, but the images that have been flooding global news networks are very worrying about what this will mean in the long term. Are you worried?
Well, I'm obviously concerned, but I am now 62 years of age. I've studied development economics and political history, and I know these things come in waves, and they'll come from time to time. But the key thing is that leadership must come to the front, to the fore, and confront the root causes of the problems and deal with them effectively in a democratic way, but also very responsive to any other actions which might be undemocratic. But never doubt your people. There must be something that is agitating them. Go to the root of it and attend to it. Economic recovery will happen as we clean up, we do the mop-up operations and rebuild the shop which has been vandalized, the road which has been dug and so on. That will all add up, by the way, from an economics point of view. Although from a low base, it will become also a high growth potential. So I'm going to these meetings with my colleagues with an open mind to do whatever we can to help South Africans. But I think for those of you from the rest of the continent of Africa, please bear with us in South Africa and share your experiences. We are a young democracy. We're bound to make many mistakes, but you have been through all of this and you can advise us, and as our brothers and sisters, we'll always listen to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. And you're right, you've been through a lot of cycles and you've seen it all. And we thank you for your service and we wish you all the best. Thank you. Time now for our keynote address, and an honor for me to welcome His Excellency Mahamudu Bawumia, Vice President of the Republic of Ghana. He is an economist and banker by training. He served as Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Ghana between 2006 and 2009. Between 2009 and 2010, he was a visiting scholar at the Center for the Study of African Economies at Oxford University. He also served as resident representative for the African Development Bank in Zimbabwe. Dr. Bawumia has published several articles and referred in journals, and has also published 2 books on monetary policy and economic development. Your Excellency, really happy that you could join us and very honored to welcome you.
Your Excellencies, Presidents, Prime Ministers, institutional leaders, representatives from the AU, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank the ACET founder and president, Dr. KY Amwako, for the introduction and hosting of the event. I bring you greetings from my president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, to the ACET family for the work well done. I'm very pleased to be invited again to speak at the Africa Transformation Forum. The previous forum hosted here in Ghana was both a great opportunity to connect with the public and private sector leaders from across Africa and an important call to action. As we gather here today, as an economist, As a Ghanaian and as an African, my experience during the COVID crisis has made the urgency and importance of collaboration very clear. A continental economic recovery with transformation is only possible with enhanced collaboration and further integration. The African Center for Economic Transformation, ACET, is a standard bearer of the economic transformation discourse. The DEATH framework is essential to understanding and pursuing transformation. ACET has advised dozens of African governments and undertaken world-class research and analysis. It has a strong and impressive track record of convening policymakers. With its advocacy, advisory, and analysis, ACET has brought new perspectives on debates and serves as an important role, not just highlighting the most urgent and relevant challenges facing Africa, but providing actionable solutions. The pandemic has held back transformation across Africa, but also provided opportunities for acceleration in areas such as digitalization. These can only be unlocked completely through integration and collaboration on shared challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, at the African Transformation Forum in 2018, I spoke about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and how Ghana was one of the first countries to sign and ratify the AFCFTA agreement. Many more countries have since joined, leading up to the operationalization of the free trade area at the start of this year. I still believe, as I said back in 2018 at the ATF, that the AFCFTA exemplifies the Pan-African approach in line with the vision of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of achieving continent-wide economic transformation. This is why we are so honored that Ghana was selected as the permanent host of the AFCFTA Secretariat. Without doubt, AFCFTA has the potential to be the game changer for the post-COVID recovery and transformation if we can harness its numerous benefits. The scale and scope of these benefits depend on overcoming inadequate related infrastructure, inadequate production capacity, trade development finance, trade information, and factor market integration. In its third transformation report, Integrating to Transform, ACET has put a spotlight on some of these important common challenges to economic transformation that require regional solutions and can be advanced more efficiently through cross-border collaboration. The government of Ghana has also recognized the urgency and importance of addressing these crucial issues: the need to generate productive employment, support digital innovation, and manage climate risks. Our policies have been developed from the outset with the mindset of transformation. This is reflected through education initiatives such as free senior high school education in Ghana, our industrialization agenda anchored around one district, one factory, and the agricultural transformation blueprint carried through Planting for Food and Jobs and Rearing for Food and Jobs programs. We have also seen digitization and the leveraging of technology in every aspect of human activity as essential to our transformation agenda. And the success of our digital transformation journey was most evident when COVID struck. The advent of drone technology to deliver medical supplies and vaccines in times of COVID was one more step in the use of technology to leapfrog some of our development challenges and overcome some of our infrastructural and logistical challenges to saving lives in remote areas. If anything, the last year has demonstrated the relevance of digital transformation in delivering contactless payments, direct rapid transfers to vulnerable populations, and an effective track and trace mechanism. We have also leveraged on digitization to uniquely identify our population through the issuance of biometric national ID cards. We have used our national ID cards to expand our tax base by simply converting the unique national ID card numbers into tax identification numbers. At the end of 2016, only 4.1% of the adult population in Ghana was registered for taxes. When we converted the Ghana card, the national ID card number, into a tax identification number, we have increased the number of people registered for taxes from 4.1% to 86%. We have also implemented a digital address system for all locations and properties in Ghana. Furthermore, to address financial inclusion, we have implemented mobile money interoperability and they made bank accounts and mobile wallets interoperable. In so doing, we have increased the proportion of the adult population with access to banking services from 30% to 90%. And these are major reforms in the transformation agenda. The integration of the Ghana card and the digital address system with the national health insurance, passport services, and the nation's pension system enhances the delivery of public services, improves the convenience of citizens, and brings considerable cost savings and improves revenue generation capacity of service providers. And when it comes to regional collaboration and integration, digital innovations will play a crucial role in the implementation of the AFCFTA and countries' ability to seize on the opportunities. As host of the AFCFTA Secretariat, Ghana sees her role in this call for the integration and collaboration as crucial. Our commitment to the integration process is currently at its strongest since independence, exemplified by the able leadership of our President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo in the ECOWAS sub-region. Integrating to transform will take dedicated leadership. ACET is calling African leaders, private sector, academic and civil society to promote visions and take actions for the broader common good beyond our borders. I am thankful for the opportunity to share some of our experiences with implementing the transformation agenda with all of you at this digital forum. And I look forward to learning from leaders at all levels and finding new ways to collaborate. Again, congratulations to ACET for its continuing work to deepen knowledge, diagnose our development problems, and convey platforms to share experiences and actionable solutions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so very much, Your Excellency. What a pleasure to hear from you. And, you know, I have a show that focuses on the continental free trade area. It focuses on how countries are getting ready. And Ghana has been one of those countries where you've seen them put money into the agriculture sector. They've been putting a big focus on increasing industrial capacity. So really interesting to hear from the Vice President. Thank you so very much. All right, so today is also the launch of the third edition of ACET's flagship publication, the African Transformation Report, Integrating to Transform. I'd like to welcome Professor John Asafo Ajaye Senior Fellow at ACET. Prior to joining ACET, he held a position as an Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Queensland. He has extensive track record in research and consultancy on agriculture, environmental and economic developmental issues in Australia, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific region. So good to see you, Professor. And I have to tell you, I've gone through the report, and I think it is so insightful and really creates a really good platform for countries and businesses to use as an example of what they should be doing going forward.
Thank you, Eleni. I'm also very excited about this report and what it has to offer. African countries have recorded some good growth over the past 2 decades, but they've made slow progress in actually transforming their economies. And this is because they've been working in isolation. As has been said, the African Continental Free Trade offers an opportunity for African countries to move beyond integration and look towards collaborating to address long-term economic challenges that constrain Africa's development. So the 2021 African Transformation Report, Integrating to Transform, tackles 3 of these frontline challenges. These are: 1, ensuring productive employment for Africa's teeming workforce by giving them 21st century skills; 2, supporting digital innovation by enabling the private sector to leverage digital technologies to create jobs, boost productivity, and reduce poverty; and thirdly, managing climate risks by promoting climate-smart agriculture, protecting green and blue ecosystems, and exploiting Africa's abundant renewable energy resources. I'll briefly touch on each of these 3 areas, starting with employment. Africa's growing youth bulge presents an opportunity to reap a demographic dividend to boost economic growth. To do this requires a comprehensive strategy that focuses on 3 policy priorities. These are: 1, creating opportunities for productive employment in labor-intensive sectors; 2, scaling up education and skills training, especially for girls, to ensure that workers are well-equipped and productive; and 3, speeding up the demographic transition to help reap the dividend by having more workers than dependents. Next is digital innovation. Digital technologies have already transformed many aspects of our lives, and they are rapidly transforming commerce and finance. With the right policies, they can be leveraged to transform entire economies. We can do this by: 1, formulating strategies and policy frameworks to promote multiply effects across the value chain; 2, developing a new policy mix with key stakeholders to respond to pressing digital innovation and development challenges; and 3, boosting investments in digital infrastructure and skills development by crowding in donor and private finance. Next is climate. Many African countries are already experiencing climate-related stresses, such as droughts, floods, and variable rainfall. And most of them are highly vulnerable to climate impacts due to their low adaptive capacity. But by leveraging technology to manage key climate-sensitive sectors, such as agriculture, ecosystems, and energy, African countries can turn these risks into opportunities. We can do this by: 1, promoting climate-smart agriculture to help African farmers increase productivity and build resilience; 2, sustaining green and blue ecosystems through applying nature-based solutions to address land use problems; and 3, developing and scaling up renewable energy through policies to increase investment, reduce upfront costs, and increase access. Achieving all these outcomes will require African countries to collaborate to deliver regional public goods. Examples of these include transport corridors, cross-border movement of people and labor, well-managed river basins, and cross-border digital connectivity. Finally, collaborating to integrate and integrating to transform will require dedicated leadership at all levels. This extends beyond politicians to include the public sector, the private sector, academia, media, and civil society. Thank you for your attention. We will now show you a short video of the 2021 African Transformation Report.
With the right collaborations and leadership, Africa can integrate to transform and tackle the shared challenges of creating productive jobs, fostering innovation, and managing climate risks. Regional collaboration will help remove barriers that have slowed progress in the past. To ensure faster and sustainable development, African countries must focus on integration and collaboration. The African Continental Free Trade Area can be a catalyst for integration beyond the expansion of continental trade. Regional public goods will be key to tackling three frontline challenges to successful transformation: how to create jobs, support digital innovation, and manage the impact of climate change. Regional public goods and regional collaboration can take many forms. In Southern Africa, the Maputo Transport Corridor between South Africa and Mozambique creates employment opportunities and further development of new urban centers in the region. In West Africa, the Senegal River Basin Development Organization provides hydropower to 4 countries and water resources for irrigation across the region. In East Africa, the One Network area, part of the East Africa Single Digital Market Initiative, lowers the cost of roaming and communications among Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda through intervention and coordination. Integrating to transform demands visionary leadership at all levels that goes beyond national interests to pursue collective actions for the common good. To read or download the ATR3, Integrating to Transform, or to learn more about ACET, please visit our website at www.assetforafrica.org and follow us at ACET for Africa on social media.
Professor, really interesting and fascinating. And I love when you said, we take these challenges and the issues and we turn them into opportunities. I guess for me right now, and I always try and look at it positively, I have seen businesses adapting so quickly and increasing manufacturing capacity when supply chains were halted. How quickly do you think we can integrate your ideas, your plans, and the research that ACET has done?
Thank you, Eleni. Actually, farmers, let me talk about farmers because that's my favorite topic. Some of them are already adapting. And when we talk about climate change, there's already indigenous types of adaptation going on. But we need to shift the pace another notch by bringing in technology. And it's not really space science at this stage because everybody has a mobile phone. In Ghana, people have 2 mobile phones. Most of these mobile phones can be used to transmit prices, information about weather, and so forth. So we need to exploit these digital technology, which is already in use, and apply it to help farmers to actually address the challenges they're facing from the changing climate. But it does need leadership, as we've already said. And so this leadership has to come from the top, from the politicians, but also from every one of us, business leaders, youth leaders. And we need to sort of collaborate, to come together to try and solve problems, and then to also try and engineer action and to make these things happen. So that's how I see it. I think we've already started well, but we need to pick it up another notch, especially with COVID.
We need to accelerate this. Absolutely. Professor, good to see you. Thank you so very much for your work. And I suggest that everyone gets their hand on this report. It is such a good read. And now it's time for our panel discussion. We've got incredible delegates and guests waiting to share their thoughts with you. But first, I'd like to welcome my sister, Nancy Kachungira, a multi-award-winning Ugandan, now based in London. She anchors for BBC World News, and she presents the weekly program In Business Africa. She used to work in Kampala and Nairobi, and she holds a master's degree in international communications from the University of Leeds. She has an incredible bio. She's held TED Talks on Africa, and this has propelled her to the global stage, and rightly so. And she's hosted a plethora of very high-level conversations, and we're so fortunate to have her joining us for this event. Nancy, welcome.
And I'm delighted to be moderating the panel that's about to take place. Now, the report, of course, explores the crucial issues a crucial issue, because for African countries to achieve transformation, they need to work together. At the moment, they're working in isolation, but coming together to hack away at these challenges that we're also familiar with could help countries transform faster. I love African proverbs because they're always so spot on. There's one that says, when the left hand washes the right hand and the right hand washes the left hand, both hands end up clean. Collaboration means faster results. But what's standing in the way of transformation through integration? How can barriers be overcome in our quest for better jobs, greater innovation, and solutions to climate change? Well, those are the questions we'll be putting to our panel. And our panel today is in fact comprised of a panel, or to be precise, members of the African Transformation Leadership Panel. They've been engaging deeply with these questions in their work, and today we get a front row seat for their insights into these issues that define a generation. As we begin, there's no better person to tell us a bit more about this panel and what it's been up to than the chair herself. So let's listen into this message.
Over the past 13 years, the African Center for Economic Transformation has been at the forefront of Africa's transformation agenda. ACET's goal is to help governments and the private sector deliver economic transformation that improves lives. The Transformation Leadership Panel, or TLP, which I chair, is delighted to work with ACET to foster deep-rooted change across Africa's 54 countries. The TLP is a group of passionate and committed development experts from the public and private sectors, both in Africa and around the world. We are united by a shared goal to influence, support, and advise leaders on critical and necessary actions to achieve transformative change in Africa. Our priorities are African priorities: jobs and education, innovation and technology, political and economic governance, climate, health, and gender equality. ACET established the TLP in 2019, following the previous year's African Transformation Forum, as a way to deepen collaboration and forge partnership. We work with political, business, and civil society leaders, and with each other, because we can accomplish more working together rather than apart for the achievement of common goals. Through innovative approaches, ACET has helped shift the development agenda, regionally and globally, toward economic transformation as the way to achieve sustained, inclusive growth. The TLP aims to work with partners to keep that agenda firmly on track.
Well, undoubtedly, that is a face and name you recognize very well. The distinguished chair of the Transformation Leadership Panel is none other than Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, former president of Liberia and Africa's first elected female head of state, Nobel Peace Laureate, a leading promoter of peace, justice, and democratic rule, a voice for freedom, and as you've heard today, a voice for Africa's transformation agenda. I'm delighted that we have Madam Sirleaf joining us for our panel discussion today. Madam Sirleaf, it's great to have you. I'll introduce the rest of our panel now as well. We're very lucky to have with us today Dolika Banda. Dolika is an independent consultant and board member focused on accelerating economic development, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and other emerging markets. Over a 36-year career, she's held senior positions with Citibank Zambia, Barclays Bank Zambia, the IFC, the CDC, and others. And in addition to the power of finance, close to her heart are issues of climate change, gender equality, education, and health. Also with us today, we have Hafez Ghanim, He is Regional Vice President at the World Bank. He's got over 30 years of experience in economic development. He's worked and lived in Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East. And he has spent most of his career at the World Bank, but he also worked for nearly 5 years at the FAO in Rome and for 3 years at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., where he's still a non-resident scholar. And here's a fun fact. He's fluent in Arabic, French, and English. I hear that he also speaks some Italian and a little Russian. So to him, dobro pozalovat. Don't be too impressed. I only learned that on Google a few minutes ago. That's welcome in Russian. Ibrahim Mayaki is also joining us today. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency, AUDENEPAD, a former Prime Minister of Niger. He previously served as Minister in charge of African Integration and Cooperation and as Minister of Foreign Affairs and as Executive Director of the Rural Hub think tank based in Dakar. And I learned recently that Dr. Mayaki was rewarded the highest distinction of the state of Japan, known as the Grand Cordon of the Order of the Rising Sun. And that was in recognition of his outstanding contribution to promoting relations between Japan and the African Union, as well as Japan and Niger. We also have with us Rita Roy, President and CEO of the MasterCard Foundation. That's one of the largest private foundations in the world and a leading philanthropic organization focused on microfinance and youth learning initiatives. And under Rita's leadership, the foundation has focused its work on Africa, and it's committed more than $4 billion to advance education and financial inclusion. I love what Rita says about herself on Twitter, that she's inspired by youth and helping shape a future that embraces their talents. Dr. Vera Songwei is also joining us today. She's the Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa. She has served as Regional Director of the International Finance Corporation. She was Country Director for the World Bank and Advisor to the Managing Director of the World Bank for Africa, Europe, and Central and South Asia. She's widely published and a non-resident Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution's Africa Growth Initiative. So, hugely qualified panel. Welcome to all of you. And it's wonderful to have you for this conversation, talking about the work that you've done with the transformation panel. So if we can start with you, Madam Sirleaf, and just to have some reflections from you, because when this panel was established in 2019, the world looked very different. One of the comments you've made recently about the current pandemic is that it's pushed many of us to the limits of our capacity, but it has also shown us the greatness that can be achieved when we work together towards a common goal. So when you reflect on the moment that we're in now, how would you describe where we're at in Africa's transformation journey within the context of the COVID pandemic and the recovery that we're now striving towards? Madam Sirleaf, I'm just checking you can hear us. If you go ahead and unmute, then we should be able to hear you well.
Sorry.
That's all right. We've got you now. So you had a few extra seconds to think about your reflections. So
thank you so much for the introduction. I'd like to say Africa may well be at a crossroad. The pandemic hit at a time when multilateral and global collective action was under threat due to nationalism, isolations, exclusion. The pandemic also exposed deep-seated inequities, injustices, with disastrous effect on economies. I think the response to that has been mixed. Too slow in terms of meeting commitment, perhaps particularly on the reallocation of vaccines to stop the pandemic. One might say good in terms of vaccines development and effort for the expansion of production in the South. We've also seen a lot of good responses from countries. The call for SDR reallocation, to whom we owe. So many of our own leaders, like Vera, who've really been gallant in supporting that we now see the effort. And the commitment from several partnership countries. At this point, on this crossroads, where are we? 2 days ago, the UK Parliament voted to reduce the level of development aid. It is likely that many countries may follow. There's been a call to ensure that as we respond to the pandemic, one should be sure there's national budgetary allocation so that we don't use ODA, suggesting again the need for national effort to be excelled. What path does Africa follow at this crossroads? Continue with the status quo, trying to be strong advocates for the continuation of support? Do we move toward more self-reliance through regional cooperation and integration? And how do we achieve that? The African Continental Free Trade Agreement provides a ready vehicle to start that process. And many of our countries indeed have performed so well that they may well be on the path for self-reliance. But how do we pull all the others into an integrative whole? The fragile states, the ones that have not performed so well, the ones that have certain constraints that are so strong, with an environment that lacks the private sector to create the growth, the jobs for the young people.
That's such an important point.
This is a question for African leaders,
yes,
to address nationally, regionally, continentally. And so let me throw that out as a start. And
that's a good one to throw out there, because that's, I think, what you've identified is, one of the key considerations. There is so much asymmetry when it comes to various African countries, the stages that they're all at. And as you've said, very much we're at a crossroads, bearing in mind, of course, that this crisis isn't over. There is this sense that with COVID-19, we've made it to the life raft, yes, but dry land is still quite far away. But it also means that there is an opportunity to, as you have said, stand at this crossroads and think about what choices we make. Where do we want to go? Many of us long for normal, but many more of us are realizing that normal wasn't good enough. So this is a time for innovation. And if I can come to you with that, Hafez, just talking about integration and innovation, can those two things really work together when it comes to driving innovation, not just within nations, but regions and ultimately the continent? What are some of those concrete policies and decisions we can take at this crossroads that would produce more innovation?
Yes, no, thank you very much. And I think, first of all, innovation can help integration in Africa and vice versa. Integration also helps innovation, and they are mutually reinforcing one another. Also in our work in the in this group, we strongly believe that Africa needs to leapfrog in the area of innovation, and especially in the digital area. I think that a reasonable objective should be that we have universal access to the internet in Africa by the end of this decade. It is an objective that is achievable and that is doable, and I will quickly tell you how that can be achieved and done. But if you want to talk about universal access to the internet, we also need to talk about access to electricity and energy, which is something that is very important too. And finally, we talked about there is big divisions among countries on our continent, but also within countries in the continent. We need to deal with inequality, and especially with gender inequality and women empowerment.
So how does innovation help with all those various challenges? What is the place of it within that framework?
Well, I mean, we have discovered innovation and the digital economy, and actually one of the lessons that came from this pandemic is how access to the digital economy is essential, and the countries that have had access to the digital economy were able to function and to maintain their economic work and to create jobs even during this pandemic. Without innovation, we would not be able to have this meeting right now. And this is just an indication of the importance of this technology. And I believe it is going to be even more important as we go forward. A few quick examples. Financial inclusion, mobile money has been very important for financial inclusion. Many people in Africa who had no access to banking systems, no access to finance, were empowered, were able to get access through mobile money. A good example that when we heard the Vice President of Ghana speaking, ID for D, providing people with digital IDs. Many Africans who had no IDs are now able to get them through the digital innovation. E-governance and improving the quality of governance, fighting corruption, just by imposing the clarity and limiting the contacts between, say, taxpayers and tax collectors and so on. So there are many ways that innovation can help. Now, what needs to happen? What needs to be done? And if I can try to speak very quickly, we need to invest much more in the infrastructure, in the connectivity, the backbone, in the last mile. We need to develop our regulatory framework to encourage innovation, to encourage investment in technology, and to bring down the cost. In many of our countries, we have access to the internet, for example, but the cost is prohibitive. We need to ensure more competition to bring down the cost. We need also to develop skills. And that's where, and to invest in skills. And finally, obviously, we need to develop regional markets, regional integration to create more opportunities. We have been told there is no reason why we should not move to a single digital market in Africa. So those are the areas where we need to work, and where I think we have a lot of opportunities. We can both public sector investments, government investments, but also by mobilizing a lot more of private investment and entrepreneurship.
And we'll talk a lot more about that. But I just want to hop on to a point that you mentioned there that is quite important in terms of infrastructure. That's a key thing. And of course, you've mentioned good examples. So one that is in the report, of course, is the One Area mobile network in East Africa. I mean, that changed my life, because as someone working between Kenya and Uganda at the time, to be able to have one network and not have to sort of hop onto another SIM card, that just makes things so different, so much easier, easiest trade, a bottom-up approach that has real results. Lots of other good examples in the report. But like you said, infrastructure is one of the key pillars that enables that. And Dolika, if I can come to you, because even though Africa has such huge infrastructure needs, there is another urgent crisis that policy actions will need to respond to, and that is climate change. The world's most industrialized nations developed at great cost to our natural world. African countries now face a difficult task of striking that balance between their own development and sustainability. And at the moment, many countries are going it alone. If you look at our agricultural research in Africa, it's highly fragmented, it's often foreign funded. How can a regional approach to some of these challenges, such as access to electricity, to power, help us reach that goal of development, but with sustainability? Sorry, Dolika, you are, okay, there you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Great to be here. So, look, one of the things I always like to say in public fora in today's conversations on Africa is, it is happening. We mustn't come at this conversation as though it is a despondent conversation and it is a nascent conversation. The innovation that we're talking about, the realization of what is required for the sustainable goals, the technology and digital world, the issues of gender equality, when you are on the ground, quite frankly, it is much more encouraging than when you're reading it from the 11th floor in some other organization. Africans are very aware of what the challenges are facing us today and what the global challenges are facing us today. Some have been mentioned in this particular question, Nancy, around the climate issue. This is an area I am very passionate about because I think that we have underestimated the cost of not managing the risk. We have identified the risk, but we have not played a great role, and we are making slower strides in terms of managing that risk and financing for that risk. It is about adaptation, which we have all focused on globally, nationally, locally, regionally, but it is also about building resilience. That resilience I'm talking about affects 60% of our population today and going forward. That is youth and that is women. So the gender issue that has been mentioned before. And these are the two categories that are so critical to the future, the Africa that you and I want to retire into in our sunset years. If we do not build resilience amongst that population, then quite frankly, we reverse all of the gains that we have made with the SDG conversations and all the UN interventions and so on and so forth. And so for me, the role of ACET and the TLP in partnership with ACET, and then in the global partnership, and Richa is on here with MasterCard to help us with that conversation, is that we roll up the ability of our nations and our societies to be resilient. I take it, quite frankly, as a risk management opportunity. It is not a failure, it is an opportunity. There is technology now on our side. There is renewable energy on our side. Technology in precision agriculture. There is new seed components that are coming up, so science and research and development in agriculture, but also on the energy side. So Hafez talked about different aspects of it. For me, the issue of climate is going to impact us in three areas. There are others, but I'll categorize it here in three areas. The one is our ability to deliver on energy. The second is our ability to build resilience amongst the end users. The third is our ability to feed our people. So technology vis-a-vis agribusiness and agriculture. And if we are able to address these three, and not address them at the national level, country level, but to integrate and collaborate as countries and as sub-regions of Africa, West Africa.
But what does that actually look like? Because, you know, we talk a lot about integration, collaboration. What does it actually look like? Is there a place where this has worked? Is there something that we can look at and say, well, actually, this is how it goes. This is what's possible.
So you have a number of research and development institutions that are happening now across the continent. I know, for example, that SADC in the Southern African Development Community is already looking at a grouping of different strengths and opportunities and collaborations that can happen within that. You also have, I know, within the West African region, groupings that are looking at how do we collaborate on seed, for example, seed development. How do we collaborate on markets and make sure that we're growing the right kinds of things, but also we're distributing the right kinds of things. So I think you've got a number of collaborations going on at the sub-regional level. And I think if we can elevate that to a continental level, then we have a much, much bigger and much stronger market and opportunity.
Okay, let's throw it to Rita, because Dolika did touch on Africa's biggest resource, and that, of course, is its young people. When we look at the jobs of the future, the jobs for Africa, only about 100 million of the 450 million Africans expected to reach working age through 2035 can hope to find a well-paid job. That's what the statistics tell us now. Young Africa Works, Rita, that's something that is something the MasterCard Foundation is pushing. You've got an ambitious goal. You want by 2030 that your work will enable 30 million young people in Africa to secure employment that they see as fulfilling, but also, very importantly, dignified. Someone looking at the statistics we have today might say we're a long way off, but what are you seeing as the things that give us hope that we can actually turn this trajectory around?
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you to all my colleagues on the TLP. Clearly, the work of the report focuses on major areas about jobs, particularly the work of education institutions in preparing young people for jobs. And as you rightly pointed out, the two most important words within the strategies around dignified and fulfilling work. So I want to just come at this probably two ways. One is we spend a lot of time listening to young people to ask them, what is dignified mean to you? And what does fulfilling mean to you? And we interviewed about 3,000 young people. And where they see work is, not surprisingly, these are young people across multiple countries who speak about work which provides an income that enables them to not only look after their immediate needs and their family's immediate needs, but also to save and plan for the future. Work that is honest, that is viewed as reputable by society. Work where young people are treated with respect and seen as contributing to not just the workplace, but to society, and of course, very importantly, work that will bring some sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. And that's what we've taken in when we think about how we prepare young people and how we engage people in industry and in the private sector, who largely are responsible for driving growth in multiple sectors, whether that's agriculture, whether it's hospitality, or some manufacturing, etc. What is very, very clear when we think about jobs of the future, in part because of the work done by many of my colleagues in their institutions, what is common across many countries, and also just in terms of big trend, is digitization. We heard the Vice President speak about how Ghana, in terms of government and services, is basically going digital. But digitization, combined with the advent of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, opens up opportunities for young people. And so when I think about preparing young people for work, whether it is in agriculture, in manufacturing, in some other industry, they're going to need digital literacy, digital skills, as well as some of the soft skills which employers constantly speak about. That's communication, being able to work on teams, being able to problem solve in teams. And that means we, as a society, need to be much more open about different ways we think about education. By and large, the vast majority of young people on the continent will enter the workforce from secondary education, so that retooling aspects of how secondary education is delivered, the content, as well as the facilitators, meaning the teachers in secondary education, will be a major priority for us. And I think the third piece is not to forget entrepreneurship. There are well over 500 hubs across the continent focusing on enabling and supporting young people with ideas at various stages of their enterprise. And so equipping many of these business models, business ideas involve some aspect of digital backbone. And so equipping them, supporting them, accompanying them, not just with finance, but also access to markets will be really critical.
Absolutely. And as you were talking there about, the kind of jobs that what young people want to have that are dignified and fulfilling, it just reminded me of a trip I recently took to Mombasa in Kenya, which was beautiful, of course. But I met there a young entrepreneur who was organizing trips for other young Africans from other countries to come and experience tourism in Mombasa without having to pay huge amounts to a tour company. He'd set up some accommodation, he was giving tours. And I met some Nigerians there who said that this was their first time in Kenya. They had no idea there were beaches in East Africa, but because of everything that's able to happen on digital now, it's possible to set up entrepreneurship journeys that we could never have imagined possible. And that's also, in an interesting way, aiding that integration. I mean, these were Nigerians who never would have thought to come to Kenya before, but now with all this technology speeding everything up, these things are happening. So Ibrahim, if I can come to you, because this integration that we talk about, of course, what I'm describing is quite bottom-led, but we need leadership in that area as well. If you had to score the continent's performance when it comes to connectedness, for instance, how would you score it now? And what has the pandemic taught us about regional integration in Africa? Where are we really at?
Well, thank you very much, and hello to all the colleagues of the panel. I tend to see, I do an analogy with, Daniel Kahneman's book on System 1 and System 2. And I think in regional integration, we have a System 1 and System 2. The System 1 is the institutional one. The African Union Commission, ourselves, AUDA, NEPAD, regional economic communities, etc. And the System 2 is the more invisible system, where you have Nigerian entrepreneurs going to Kenya, Kenyan lawyers going to Rwanda, etc. The System 2 is much faster than the System 1. And the System 1 is not fast because the African Union is not a supranational organization. So countries and regions can apply, implement if they want, but they are not obliged to. It's not like the European Union. Mm. So this system is slower, and the other system is faster. So you have a two-speed society in the continent in terms of regional integration. So the question is, how do we reconcile these two systems? Because we need the institutional one, because committees need to meet, agriculture ministers need to meet and have a common position, for example, when they go to a food system summit in order to defend Africa's interests, etc. But it is slower. So how do we make it less slow? And how do we make it interact better with the other system, which is faster? And I think the key issue there is leadership. And this is where the TLP is so important. Leaders who do understand that they are in a slow system and that there is a speedy system for which they need to create the necessary ecosystem, then these leaders are really propelling and pushing Africa forward. So that would be my answer.
And what a great one. I mean, it's fantastic to think about it that way in terms of a two-track system, as you've said, because again, my Nigerian tourist friends, if the visa restrictions in Kenya were prohibitive, they might not have made it that far. So thinking about it in terms of those two systems and how they can work well together, I think is a great example. And well, we have an example of, progress in that direction with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, of course. Vera, if I can come to you for this, because this obviously is about integration with trade. And I'll just pull up something you tweeted recently that caught my attention. You said the AFCFTA, it always rolls off the tongue, doesn't it, is Africa's Marshall Plan, and we must commit to regional and national value chain deepening. Imagine for a minute, DR Congo refining coltan, its share in the value chain will go from 3% to 28% of the revenue. Now, that's incredible. That seems like a real tangible example of what's possible when we have integration. But I'm wondering, just how far do we have to go beyond trade, just trade, beyond what the Continental Free Trade Agreement is trying to do in order to arrive at integration that really transforms the continent, Vera?
Thank you very much, Nancy, and greetings to all my colleagues, and of course to our distinguished Excellency, the President Ellen. It's always amazing to just see the many number of things that Madam President does and keeps us alive doing. I think that's the beginning of integration. She integrates us all. So very good to see you, Madam President. Let me take off from your example or my, the tweet. So the whole GDP of DRC is 44 billion or 50 billion if you want. The transformation of coltan, the transformation chain, the mining part of it is 11 billion. The first bit of processing takes you from 11 billion to 44 billion, which is essentially taking the stone and just cleaning it and putting it in a ship and sending it to further lands afar. The third bit of that is what we call precursors and the manufacturing of precursors. The manufacturing of precursors is a $271 billion market. Let me repeat, $271 billion. The GDP of DRC is 50 billion. Now, the idea of DRC has coltan, 80% of the world's coltan sits in DRC. We could get a little bit of platinum from South Africa and a little bit of lithium from Burundi. That is the free trade agreement in the making. And create precursors and manufacture precursors in DRC. If DRC were only to get, let's say, 15-20% of that, it will more than double its GDP in 3 years. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of prosperity we're talking about. Now, the beauty of this is that we're no longer just talking about it. I was just in DRC last week talking with the president of DRC, who is now the chair of the African Union, and saying, these are the numbers for you. We need to create 16 million jobs. We can actually do this if you come behind this agenda. DRC owns every mine in DRC. The government of DRC owns some percentage of it. So we already have access to the raw material. All we need today is to create an environment that brings the fabrication of that onto the continent. And we're working on that. And the offtake is all over the place. Every car we drive, every new technology needs something from DRC. So it's the will, it's the political leadership. I think that my friend Mayeki was talking about that really matters. And we're going to put it to the test in the next 4 months. Bloomberg is doing the study for us. The president of DRC has said, yes, we're working with Jacqueline. That's what at least we at the ECA call ideas to action. And Dolika just said it. On the continent, things are happening. There's a private sector in DRC that wants to do this. Actually, we don't even need foreign investment capital. When we went to DRC, the businessmen in DRC were saying, we can do this, but we need the technology. So we are looking at Poland and Japan and Australia to bring in the technology. Now, the second thing that we're doing with the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is just yesterday, I was talking to 8,000 young girls. We had run an ICT camp. Again, as Dolika was saying, these things are happening. With 8,000 young women from across the continent. Actually, we were trying to do it just for Central Africa, but we got from across the continent. And a young lady in Tunisia, working with a young lady in Ethiopia and another one in Kenya, designing maternal medical devices that would alert a pregnant woman if she needed help immediately. You know, the young kids in Tunisia that have now put a new law in place that their government is about to adopt or has adopted in terms of how you set up startups using technology and why we can make the process simpler. I think so the integration of the CFTA is not just about the hardware as Wayaki was saying and Dolika was saying, it's also about the software, it's the people, and you talking about, Nigeria visiting. But I think there are two things that we should be careful about today. I call them, there is a sense that we're going towards a period of dynamic divergence. Dynamic divergence, as Madam President said, because of ICT, we are creating even more inequality on our continent. The haves, the 17% that can access the internet, to whom we can give the online courses and train them to become robotics engineers and are getting access. But then there is another 70% that are not getting access. And as Hafez said, we do need that last mile. We need that connectivity so that our girls can ensure that they are connected. Dynamic divergence globally, because the world has given itself $20 trillion in stimulus to rebuild. In the United States, we're talking about inflation. Have we pumped in too much money? Should we stop pumping? And Africa has not gotten anything or not gotten enough. And again, the continents are diverging. We need to find some way of bringing back what I call harmonious convergence. And that requires changing the global system, because if we cannot change that system, I think there will be problems. And there, I must say that Rita has done a fantastic job, because part of what Rita has done working with us using ICT is we have been able to pull Africa together to procure COVID-19 vaccines as one. Coming together, the power of a $1.3 billion continent going to the market and saying, we want to buy vaccines, we have the resources, African resources to procure those vaccines, has been an amazing fit. And I think with the support of foundations like MasterCard, we can at least wait for next month, we will get COVID vaccines into our systems. The first thing that we must do, and that's part of this dynamic divergence, is we all watch the Euro championships. And each one of us probably had a team, but we saw those people in the fields and they're all vaccinated. And only 2.3% of the African population is vaccinated. That kind of divergence will not deliver the world we need, and we must do different.
Right. That's a fantastic submission, and I will refrain from making any reference to the Euro 2020, the Euros. But as I think you've touched on something really important there, and also it's wonderful just to see how much integration there is between this panel, because you all know what everybody's up to, and you're all making it work together, which is, a prime example of what you're trying to achieve on a broader scale, on a macro level. But that issue of finding some kind of homeostasis, if you will, and looking at the divides that are cropping up. Madam Sirleaf, you broke barriers, you shattered the glass ceiling, and we like to say, when the ceiling is shattered, it can't be put back together. But there are still many divides that exist in Africa. The gender divide, that's widening even as access to digital innovations continues. There's an increasing gap, as Vera has said, between the haves and the have-nots. This is something we can't afford for the future. What is your response to the increasing inequality that's cropping up even as we go on this transformation journey as a continent? I think you're muted again. Sorry. We should have
processes have started for changes in constitution, in laws, in policies that promote equity. Women group are working again, breaking the stereotyping, responding to patriarchy that have kept women behind. And there's progress. But there's one thing that has to change: attitudes. How do we break the attitudes of men, and sometimes women also, that the role of women are those that are home caring, children bearing, and thereby do not give them full equity. But I want to note the positive changes that are being made. They are real, they're irreversible, and the demand of women for their proper role in society and their leadership at all levels in society is strong and is unchangeable. If you look around at parliaments, executives, you see that every year the numbers increase, but the pace has to be quickened, because if we stay at this pace, it will take us almost a generation to be able to achieve full equity. Let's applaud African Union, UN that have done some of this. But particularly, let's reach out to men in terms of attitudinal change. That's why we're including men now in all of our advocacy efforts. We want to hear from them too. What it takes for them to see women on equal footing in every aspect of life, profession, everything, without them compromising any other thing for which they are suitably designed to be. So that's it. Change the laws, change policies, change constitutions where necessary, change attitudes, women themselves on the front line, demanding change and setting the examples themselves, promoting leadership, and bringing men into the tent for the transformational change.
It is happening, but needs to happen faster. We don't have the luxury of time, as you say. And well, that's one type of education. But if we look at education broader, Rita, some of the greatest opportunities for the future are, with soft skills and in the service industry, with digital technologies. The rest of the world is talking about the fourth industrial revolution. Some of our countries are still trying to figure out how to get power to areas that don't have it. But at the same time, we have to think about how to keep up with the rest of the world, not keep up, but actually overtake, how we can own the new world. But this challenge we face, the vast majority of African youth are transitioning into the world of work before entering tertiary education. Only 9% of primary school students reach higher education, and the quality of education is important too, because 87% of 10-year-olds, one study found in sub-Saharan Africa, can't read and understand a simple story, which leaves them unprepared for secondary education. These are the facts that we're dealing with. But give us a little bit of hope here. How do we participate in this revolution and own it and lead the charge, given the very big challenges that we do face?
You've nailed it. I think we have so much work to do to get some of the basics right. And that has to do with literacy, numeracy. We have to add in their digital literacy at the same time. We just can't not sequence this. We need to do a lot of things concurrently. And what the good news is that despite the very reality, there's still so many silos that pervade our whole development space, we are seeing some shining models of great collaboration between private industry as well and education, the education sector. So often, the providers or the supply of the workforce do not speak to the ones who are seeking talent, the employers. And so in countries like Senegal, you have new types of institutions, relatively new types of institutions in tertiary education, which are very industry focused. There's an organization called the ACET, which focus on particular sectors, whether it's the railways, where they are really looking to train young people in skills and across multiple disciplines for that industry. You see the same thing in Burkina Faso. We're also working to enable some collaboration between government and private vocational institutions in Kenya to recognize the fact that so many young people do have skills which they have picked up informally, but the marketplace has no formal way of accrediting or grading, rating those skills. And so putting together collaboration between institutions and government to say, how do we now recognize what we would call prior learning? Similarly, there is so much educational institutions themselves, where even if though they may be universities, let's say like Ashesi University in Ghana, alone, we can do to work with other universities who want to have step change improvements, both in terms of the content of what they're teaching, the pedagogy, but also managing their institutions and really focusing in on preparing young people for the workplace. And that means putting a pipeline together of apprenticeships, internships, a lot more experiential types of on-the-job learning, so young people are equipped and entering the workforce isn't a foreign or an alien adventure. Vera Dolika made some nice comments a moment ago about the work of the foundation. I think the work of all of us on this panel is also not just about integration, but it's shifting the narrative about not just what is possible, but what is already happening on the continent. And foundations like ours can certainly play a role, but we couldn't play a role without the phenomenal leadership that Vera, Ibrahim Benedict Orama, who's not here, John Kangasong at the Africa CDC, leaders like this are exemplifying. And so we want to get behind their work, their leadership, because that is driving change on the continent. So thank you, Nancy.
I think that's a fantastic way to frame the role of this panel. And in that all-important role of changing the narrative, one thing that often strikes me is how we talk about, how the mobile phone changed Africa, rather than how Africans changed the mobile phone, for instance, because that was African innovation, that was African ingenuity. And as you say, these are things that need to be highlighted. I'm going to have to start wrapping up the panel, and unfortunately, because we could go on and on, but I just want to get a sense from a few of you of what you feel is some of the low-hanging fruit. Looking back at the work that you've done, there is a lot to be done, but what's a good place to start? Dr. Amoako likes to say our biggest economic opportunities are our social ones too. So if I could just get a quick answer from each of you, I'll start with you, Dolika. What is an area that you feel is low-hanging fruit? This could yield good economic and social rewards.
Education, primary, tertiary, and specialized. Collaboration within Africa. SADC, WEMOA, whoever, we are the same people. Africa is our continent, and leadership. It is happening, and I think the conversation is out there. Let us leverage the technological platforms, means of communication to get the story out there. And I always like to say, Nancy, it is time for us to talk up Africa and not talk down Africa in everything that we do on a daily basis.
I love that. Ibrahim, a few thoughts from you about what that low-hanging fruit is.
I agree with what Dolika said, but the conclusion to which we came, and it's not we, it's a conclusion. It's the more we focus on a certain issue sectorally, the more we see that it is multi and cross-sectoral. So it's the institutional capacity is growing in order to tackle this multi-sectoral issue. There is nothing we tackle in education which doesn't have to do with land restoration, with ATVET for women in agriculture, etc., etc. So cross-sectorality is really the critical point for building institutional capacity. And institutional capacity will be absolutely critical. And that's an issue of leadership again. Because there are two types of leaders. The leaders who really put their hands on the nitty-gritty of implementation. They are sometimes criticized for micromanaging. But when you are in a context of weak institutional quality, you need to put your hands in the nitty-gritty. You need to get into implementation. And the other leaders who are just, looking after the strategies and so on. But leadership, putting your hands in the nitty-gritty, getting into implementation, making sure that it happens, correcting, and allows to really tackle this cross-sectorality.
Great point there. And leadership is something we'll be talking about a little bit more in our next panel. So that's fantastic. Hafez, any thoughts about just maybe one low-hanging fruit that you feel would yield a good result?
Yes, actually, a low-hanging fruit, I think, is electrification now. I was in Sudan 3 weeks ago and talking to young people there and talking to them about their work with the digital economy and so on. And they were telling me But the biggest constraint we have now is electricity. Only 30% of the population has access to electricity, and those who have access to electricity don't have it all the time. I think it's a low-hanging fruit because, and following on something that Dolika said in her first intervention, which is that today's technology, when we're talking about the green technologies and the fact that we have this solar technology, off-grid technologies, mini grids, we can electrify all of Africa and make that connection. It needs political will. It needs working together across the continent. It has to be a continental initiative, which we have actually started discussing it with the African Union. And I believe that, yes, green technologies and climate change, we need to look at those things as opportunities and seize those opportunities. And it could be a low-hanging fruit.
A very good point. The basics are important. That was a fantastic report you did from South Sudan. It was very encouraging for me to see how young people are embracing agriculture, something we often don't think. But Vera, if we can come to you for your final thoughts on this.
Let me give an example, maybe as a way of responding to your question. So when the crisis hit, we created something called the African Communications Initiative Platform, essentially bringing together all the information on COVID so we could send it out. And then we had to hire an artificial intelligence company to run it. And we couldn't find one on the continent. So we had to pay almost $1 million to this company in Dubai. So we decided we'll create an AI center in the Congo. And we were thinking to ourselves, are we crazy or is this really going to happen? 5 months ago, the president of Congo gave us a building and a couple of teachers and faculty. We created an AI center. Dubai World is now coming. Google is now coming. We're getting more requests to use the AI center as management platforms for business in Africa. What is the meaning of this? This means there is opportunity everywhere. Everywhere is a good place to start. Everywhere where there are a few young kids with a good idea is a good place to start. I think what we need to do is start and then scale it and scale it quickly. There are tons of fantastic ideas on the continent looking for a way to just scale. And that's why I continue to believe the CFTA is our Marshall Plan. If you take the young doctor in Rwanda who has a fantastic idea on how you can provide, door-to-door service and give her the resources to do that for even just 2 parts of the continent, Western Central Africa, she'll become a unicorn in 5 years. And I really believe we just need to believe and then scale quickly. Thank you.
What a fantastic note to end it all off with. I think I'm going to get that on a t-shirt. Everywhere you can find a few good kids and a good idea is a great place to start. That's brilliant. Thank you so much to all our panelists. It's clear to see just from your energy, your collaboration, that you really are driving this agenda forward. And I think the thing that struck me most is the humility and the willingness to listen. And I think that's something we could all use a lot more of. It's something we heard from the Vice President. It's something we heard from Honorable Tito Momboeni as well. That humility and openness to collaborate is something we want to carry forward. Thank you once more to all the panelists. I'll now hand back over to Eleni for the rest of the day. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us for next panel now, and we apologize again for those slight technical difficulties. I often think of it as, sometimes it's just the tax you pay for not having to go to a physical location. But thank you so much for sticking with us and seeing it through. We're on to our second panel of the day now, a conversation I'm very excited about. This is all about leadership. In the first panel, we took a broad look at the tapestry of Africa's journey of transformation, if we can call it that, a broad overview of past, present, and future, what's happened, what's happening, what needs to happen. On this panel we're about to have, we're going to zoom in a little bit and focus on what is currently a dominant thread in this tapestry, the COVID pandemic and what comes after. It's been a year and more of hoping and coping, but now we're starting to have conversations about what a recovery might look like. We want to get back to normal, but we also want normal to be better than it was before. So I will introduce my panel now. We have a diverse group of leaders with us today. We're very privileged to have with us Souleymane Diarra-Souba, the Minister of Trade and Industry of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire. Before joining the government, he was the Managing Director of the Atlantic Business International Group, and he previously served as Côte d'Ivoire's Minister of Trade, Industry, and Small and Medium Enterprise Promotion, and also Minister of Industry and Mining. Welcome, Minister. Thank you for joining us today. And he will be speaking in French, so be sure to have your translations on if you need that. We also have with us today Christina Duarte, a United Nations Special Advisor on Africa. She's the Strategic Advisor to the Secretary General on African Affairs. That's the focal point in UNHQ for relations with the AUDA-NEPAD, as well as the African group with regard to Africa's development. And before she joined the UN, Christina served as Cape Verde's Minister of Finance and Planning for 10 years. Welcome, Christina. Also with us today, Tony Orteg Jassy is the president of the Association of Ghana Industries. He's also managing director and chairman of Tropical Cable and Conductor Limited. That's a wholly Ghanaian-owned manufacturer of electric cables. Now, Tony began his career at the research department of the Bank of Ghana, but he set up his first company in 1986 and he's been flying ever since. Welcome, Tony. Also with us is Edwin Ecoria. He is ONE's Africa Executive Director. So he leads ONE's advocacy work across the continent. He's got over 19 years of experience in the development sector. He previously managed the Transparency and Accountability portfolio for ONE in Africa, as well as the Nigeria Country Program. And before he joined ONE, he was with the World Bank. Mariel Armandi is with us today. Mariel is a young professional in the entrepreneurship innovation ecosystem. She advocates for equal access to economic opportunities in the digital economy and the inclusion of women and youth governance. And over the last few years, she's supported impact projects for several regional human rights development and leadership organizations. Welcome, Mariel. Welcome to you all. Now, this is an important panel because we need to highlight leadership as a key factor that will enable transformative growth. This is something that came up quite a bit in the last panel. And when we look at COVID, what we learn personally from this crisis will be different for everyone. But this pandemic has provoked many of us to ask hard and deep questions, not just personally, but also collectively, politically, regionally, and globally. So this is a good time for leaders at all levels to identify and share lessons that can help us achieve not just a recovery, but a transformative recovery. So if we can start with you, Minister Diarra-Souba, if you can just tell us from where you sit as a leader, what are some of the main things you're thinking about as we plan a recovery from COVID-19? What might you do differently? I think you need to unmute, Minister. If you just press the unmute button and then we'll be able to hear you.
Oui.
Fantastic.
Je voudrais en tout cas vous remercier pour cette opportunité d'échange. Au nom du Premier ministre de la Côte d'Ivoire, M. Patrick Achi, qui a bien voulu que je le représente en fait à ce panel de haut niveau. Et vous dire que pour ce qui concerne la Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons eu en fait lors de la COVID-19 à mettre en place un plan économique, social et humanitaire de l'ordre de 3,4 milliards de dollars pour pouvoir soutenir notre économie, ce qui nous a permis à la fin de l'année 2020, malgré toutes les difficultés, d'avoir un taux de croissance positif de l'ordre de 2%. Voilà ce qui a fait de la Côte d'Ivoire, qui était parmi les 25 pays au monde qui n'ont pas connu en fait de déficit au terme de l'année 2020. Il est clair qu'après cette période de Covid, il faut bien pouvoir en tirer des legs, ce qui nous amène au niveau de notre pays à mettre l'accent sur en fait la résilience de notre économie à travers un nouveau projet de société que nous appelons Côte d'Ivoire solidaire pour que nous puissions mettre l'accent sur la transformation de nos matières premières et la production au niveau local des produits que nous consommons. Parce que nous avons noté pendant la période de Covid, avec l'impact sur le trafic aérien, le trafic maritime au niveau international, quel était le niveau de dépendance en fait de nos différentes économies. Donc, nous travaillons dans le cadre de notre plan national de développement 2021-2025 pour changer structurellement notre économie, mais à travers l'industrialisation que nous poussons, parce que c'est cela qui nous permettra de créer de la valeur et d'être moins dépendants également de certaines contingences et de certains chocs exogènes, comme je l'ai aussi indiqué. Et l'autre point également sur lequel nous travaillons par rapport à la période post-Covid, c'est tout ce qui porte en fait sur la digitalisation et la dématérialisation. Donc, notre administration travaille à cet effet pour que, en fait, au niveau pour améliorer l'efficacité de notre administration vis-à-vis du secteur privé et également amener, en fait, les différents opérateurs économiques et les consommateurs à changer d'attitude et à changer également d'habitude. Le troisième axe de notre intervention par rapport à tout ce qui concerne la période post-Covid, c'est de travailler à l'effet que nous puissions continuer notre marche en avant dans les grands ensembles, notamment à travers notre communauté économique, la CEDEAO, et à travers le projet majeur africain qui est actuellement en cours, qui porte aussi la zone de libre-échange économique continentale et africaine. Donc voici un peu, mesdames et messieurs, en tout cas ce que je peux vous indiquer à ce niveau, je veux dire à ce stade de mon propos, et vous indiquer que, comme on appelle, pour ce qui nous concerne, c'est vraiment de relancer l'économie et puis de travailler à ce que, bon, au niveau sanitaire, que les populations puissent se vacciner. Et à ce niveau, nous avons reçu pas mal de vaccins, aussi bien des vaccins COVAX ou bien des vaccins également dans le cadre de la coopération bilatérale avec certains pays. Et il y a une sensibilisation qui est en cours par les autorités sanitaires pour que, en fait, les populations soient vaccinées et que l'activité économique puisse prendre le pas sur ce que nous avons connu par le passé. Merci.
Thank you very much, Minister. That's fantastic to hear right from the top what the initiatives are. 2% growth after the sort of year we had is laudable indeed. We'll talk a bit more about that later. And just for anyone who might not have had the translation on, it's that little world icon at the bottom, and you can just make sure it's in the language that you need to hear it in. But if we can come to you, Christina, I'm interested in hearing your perspective, your view from the top about what recovery will look like after the pandemic. And I'm specifically interested in how this past year and a half or so has impacted the African Union Agenda 2063, which was already quite ambitious.
Thank you, Nancy. Sorry, allow me 2 minutes, and I'll be very quick, Nancy, to answer the previous questions. The 2 things that I think should be addressed. Africa has a myriad of hundreds of challenges from A to Z. I think after COVID-19, we have a huge opportunity, thanks to the disruptions, to face what are the root of the challenges. And allow me that there are 2 in my view: leadership and ownership. And I believe that any other challenge stems from these 2, leadership and ownership. And I'm taking the opportunity to say so because this is a conversation about leadership. And sorry, Nancy, I could not miss it. I could not miss it. Allow me to give an example so people understand my point of view. In Africa, we have 600 million people without electricity. 1 data, let's say. Second, from today until 2030, Africa needs $500 billion, I repeat the number, $500 billion to bridge the gap. At the same time, Africa loses about $89 billion a year in illicit financial flows. If we multiply this 89 by 10 years, from 2020 to 2030, it comes up $890 billion. If we compare with the $500 billion money that we need to bridge the gap, so we can agree that Africa has money. It's not a problem of not having money. So is this a technical problem? Is this situation where we do not know what policies to implement? I do believe that when planning and working towards recovering better, we need to make a small but important distinction. Africa's ability to generate flows and the existence of $89 billion of illicit financial flows confirms, it's a proof that Africa has ability to generate flows. What is missing is Africa's ability to mobilize those flows. So we need to make this distinction. And I do believe to move from generation to mobilization, we need leadership, and we need ownership over our economic flows, financial flows, and fiscal flows. And I do believe that COVID-19, thanks to the disruptions, is just giving us a huge opportunity.
Well, Christina, if I can just pick up on that and press you on that a bit, because I'm sure everyone will agree, yes, leadership is important, but tell us, okay, what is missing? Because is this a matter of the leaders know what to do and don't want to do it? Is it a matter of the system ends up constraining the leaders? Where exactly is the gap? Because we can't fix what we haven't properly identified.
Yes, thank you for the question. No, it's a combination. Let me say in this way, it's a combination. It's a combination of systemic issues, because let me give you an example of a systemic issue to make myself clear. The international financial system, for example. A set of African countries after COVID-19, they accessed the DSSI facility, the debt relief facility. What happened with those countries? They have been downgraded by credit rating agencies almost in the following day, making much more expensive, much more costly their tapping the international markets to keep accessing money to face the challenge, COVID-19 challenge, because debt relief is far away from being the only financial resource. So there are systemic issues. But let's look inside Africa. We need to reshape our leadership in Africa. We need to exercise ownership over our economic flows. And there is a proxy. We can measure that. If you allow me, Nancy. The only way, based on my experience, and believe me, I'm responding to your question, leveraging my 25 years of policymaking in Africa. And there is a proxy. When there is political will to exercise leadership and ownership, you look at the institutions. If you put in place strong, transparent, accountable institutions, you are seriously exercising ownership and leadership. Because you cannot exercise leadership and ownership in a vacuum room, in a vacuum ecosystem. You need institutions. You need strong regulatory board. You need strong court of accounts. You need processes, systems, norms, procedures, more. You need to give space to your civil society to organize and to have a voice. So these are things that are pieces that allow a country, a nation, to exercise leadership and ownership. So I do believe that indeed, these are the two root challenges of Africa. Back to you, Nancy.
All right, thank you, Christina. And I am aware that you may have to drop off a little early because you had another engagement. So no problem if you have to do that. We appreciate you staying on and of course, making your submission. But if you can stay on, that would be fantastic, of course. But you have, raised some important points there about how leadership changes the entire ecosystem. Tony, I wonder how that has affected you in your business. You're a business leader, you're employing people, you are manufacturing. How important is the leadership ecosystem for you to be able to do what you do?
Thank you, Nancy. Yes, I agree very much about the need for leadership. What I would quickly add to that is leadership at all levels. Too often we look at leadership at the national level and forget that it must go beyond it. We have leadership at the national level, which sometimes behave almost like royalty, almost like a king, which is what culturally we were used to, with unfettered power. I think we need to move swiftly to the idea of accountable leadership, leadership within limits.
And how do we do that, Tony? Because this is something we've identified over and over, but how does that happen?
And that is where we come to, first at the national level, the kind of constitutions which our countries run and which allow certain things to happen which shouldn't happen. We should be able to bite the bullet and say that our constitutional provisions amenable to the rapid development we seek, or they actually bring temptations which derail our plans too often. That is the first thing. But to come more generally to the issue of leadership at the private sector level, I mean, that is also equally important. And it is also important that between the private sector and the public sector, we recognize a common agenda, that beyond the profit-seeking motive of the private sector and the overall development-seeking motive of at the national level of political leaders, we should recognize that the two are not mutually exclusive and that we should be able to do the two together. And this is where I think that we have passed the AFCFTA regulations. We are looking at details of it. It is important that at every stage, the private sector, the operators on the ground, come in with their experience and have a chance to influence the regulations which are coming out. It should not be left solely to policymakers who give a take or leave policy framework, because there are many nuances to the politics and the economic policy of economic integration. We should have
if I may ask, are you happy with what you've seen so far with the Continental Free Trade Agreement as a business leader?
So far, all that I'll say is that so far, so good. But we haven't seen a lot yet. The rules of origin and all the nuts and bolts which will really make us assess the policy have not yet come out. And that is why this is the time to ask that participation in making those rules should be in place so that we don't make the rules and have a try and error situation, because there are many errors from our experiences at ECOWAS, the East African trade, the South African SADCC level. We have many experiences which can be brought to bear right now, and we should have a chance to influence these regulations.
That's a very important point, Tony. Thank you for that. Leadership at all levels. Edwin, you are involved in advocacy. I'm just wondering, related to Christina's point earlier about the systems that can sometimes constrain the changes that we want to see. Is that a concern for you? Do you sometimes feel that what you're able to do, what you're able to advocate for, is operating within limiting systems that themselves need to change? Or do you feel that actually it's just a matter of having the right attitudes and leadership and the political will in order to effect the kind of changes you're pushing for?
I totally agree with Christine in terms of the system that is kind of skewed against the Africa's emerging. And I use those words carefully, because I think if there's anything that COVID has taught us is that we actually on our own, you know. And I think in the previous panel we had the the message that we should stop being the pity of the world. And I think for many years we've seen that the different architecture, and I think Christine gave this perfect example. When in the multilateral framework, the DSSI was created, to cushion and push for debt suspension for the poorest countries that need it most. And like Vera said, when the richer countries have spent trillions of dollars to revamp their own economy to assist recovery, and Africa is barely able to just put less than 2% of their GDP in the recovery process. Now with a massive debt burden, that currently plagues the continent, a multilateral framework like the DSSI was created to help do this. For the countries that participated in the multilateral arrangement, they get downgraded. And what does that mean? It means that Africa has to get money in the financial market at much higher interest rates. And of course, if you had asked me the first question you asked, what are the two things that comes to mind? The very first thing I would say post-COVID is, where do we get the money to recover? And that is the biggest thing, actually, because recovery takes money. Recovery takes investments. Recovery takes liquidity. Before the pandemic, Africa was already facing a major liquidity crisis. And the major reason why this is the case is that Africa borrows at the highest level, highest interest rate around the world. So this is systemic. So
if we put those two things together to try and drive a solution, this idea that we should no longer be the pity continent, but also we need money to drive this resurgence. What answer do we arrive at? Because clearly we don't want to go begging, but we need the money to survive. So what's the way forward?
And that is the whole point of asking for a reform of the multilateral system or of the financial system, number one. But number two also is to address the structural inequities that we already see, particularly in terms of access to markets or financial markets that we're currently seeing. This is what we're advocating for right now. So for instance, let's look at the DSSR, the SDR's allocation. We are happy that the G20 came together and concluded, and the board of directors just also agreed with the IMF for the allocation of the $650 billion SDRs that is coming, right? This is not a charity now, right? This is about what we need to do to recover. Now, the first thing we saw is that from the $650 billion that is supposed to come from the SDRs, right? Just 5% will come to the African continent, right? Just 5%, or 33 billion as a whole, will come to the continent as a whole. Now, within that framework, the question is, what does Africa need to respond, to buy vaccines and to respond? So Africa has to go back to taking loans. And these are basically the structural inequities that we need to really address at the multilateral level. So that is one. It has to happen. It's not about pity, it's about justice. And that is why we need to restate the narrative. It's not about going to ask to be the pity pot of the world, but it's about the justice that is needed to get us there. And like Christine said, in terms of illicit financial flows, we are losing much more, than we are getting even from the multilateral system. And so these are the questions we need to deal with first. But I dare say that I want to quickly land by saying that to get the needed finances, there are some institutions that were created for this. They are called development finance institutions. Development finance institutions. The question is, to what extent have they invested in the growth of the continent, in the sectors that will catalyze jobs, in the sectors that will improve the private sector operations? How many DFIs have put money in the startups that we are seeing? You're seeing some unicorns coming out of Africa right now. How many DFIs have put the money behind them? So we need to tell ourselves the truth and fight for this thing as justice and not as charity. And I think that's the key advocacy that we are currently pushing for, to say post-COVID, we need to rethink the system and see it as a matter of justice and not as a matter of charity.
Very good points. And I think crucially, as you say, the importance of speaking with one voice. I mean, if we look at the vaccine nationalism that came up as part of COVID, and the fact that the COVAX facility was a collaboration, it would have been very difficult for individual countries to fight that battle on their own. So that's a good point you are about how Africa negotiates with the world. Now, Mariel, as a young person sitting here, I mean, panels these days are always talking about young people, right? I'm wondering how that feels to you as a young person, do you feel involved? Do you feel hopeful about your future? Because we're always talking about your future.
Thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this panel. And I think it's always very interesting to see perspectives from around the continent. And as a young person, our main objective coming into spaces like these is to reassure the leadership that we indeed have something to bring to the table. As young people, if you look at the history across the continent, many of us have begun to even have political apathy when it comes to participating in leadership spaces, solely because whenever we are involved, it's about ticking all the boxes in what we call public participation, just to assure the right donors, the right funders, or maybe even the voters who gave you sovereignty to rule, that you indeed included all the young people. But right now, what we are pushing for is inclusion in policy design and implementation. As activists across the continent, as young professionals, it is indeed our mandate to make sure that when leadership conversations are happening, we are coming in to showcase exactly what it is we are coming to do. I was very inspired to see that you're including entrepreneurs on this space, and it's quite important in making sure that young people are involved in wealth creation so that we can be part of the decision-making table. It's been the one thing that has deterred us from actively participating.
If I can get a little personal with you, Mariel, just looking at the COVID pandemic, what, as a leader, because you're a leader, in your own right, as a leader, what has that brought to the surface for you? What has it made you concerned about? And what has it made you look at differently?
I think the one thing that I could point out, COVID-19 really brought with it a lot of hardship on the continent. So many of us had to lose jobs. We had to regroup ourselves and just to find out what we could do to make sure that we are not being left behind. But the one thing that I had to be confronted with was the fact that gender-based violence in my own community became such a massive issue. Looking at some of the statistics that I even picked up in a recently launched report by our government on over 250,000 girls being out of school. And that was as a result of many of them either suffering violence that deterred them from accessing resources from their abusers to go to school, or child marriages, and even teenage pregnancy. I work in Homa Bay County, and I run a small initiative that has managed to support tens of, and I only say tens, solely because as first responders, as community responders, we found it very difficult to actually access the resources, get into government offices that can give us what we need to go and make sure everyone who is going through abuse does not lack the opportunity to actually grow as a human being. I think that was quite difficult, and especially when you look at it in the context of persons with disabilities, we actually ended up rescuing a lot of underage young people, young girls who are faced with both mental and physical disabilities, but unable to access the appropriate healthcare and also legal support.
Right. Mariel, thank you so much for sharing so candidly with us. If I can come to you, Christina, just hearing from Mariel, these are things that young people across the continent are dealing with every day, things that they're concerned about. One of the big goals for the AU agenda is obviously improving living standards, as well as an integrated Africa, which is the broader theme that we're talking about today. But my question to you is, where is the place of collaboration when it comes to these granular issues that nations are concerned with, improving the lives of their people? Where is the place for collaboration? How can collaboration and integration help? Sorry, you're muted, Christina.
Sorry. We have been doing that in the past 18 months, but we still not learned, sorry. we need to be conscious as Africans that unfortunately the major part of our African economies display a higher level of dysfunctionalities. Just look at the size of the informal sector, for example, is a proxy. Just look how terrorism has been getting ground in Africa, exactly leveraging in these dysfunctionalities. My question to the young lady, how we are going to promote a collaborative mode approach when at the same time you face dozens of dysfunctionalities. You face a huge lack of institutions, and the institutions that are in place display, how can I say, are weak institutions. When I mentioned illicit financial flows, these are the tip of the iceberg. It's not the iceberg. So let's not take the tip of the iceberg as the iceberg itself. How can policymakers promote collaboration without giving space, for example, to more civil society organizations? But how can you do that if you face high levels of dysfunctionalities? This is a myriad of problems, and I believe that we should be very careful not to start using these fashion words when you don't grab the root of the problems. I would like to go again, for me it's the root cause of our problems. I would like to go again to financing for development, to what Edwin said, if you allow me, Nancy. We cannot be forever in this paradox. From our right hand, we lose $890 billion. And from our left hand, we beg for money. We need to get ourselves together and overpass this paradox. Because if you want to promote inside each nation a more collaborative approach between governments, policymakers, private sector, young population, civil society organizations, we need to start addressing this in a more structured way. What are the root causes? Get control of our flows, start financing on a very persistent and consistent basis public goods, social goods. In the 2019 report, Nancy, from African Development Bank, Africa had a deficit of 4 million teachers. 4 million teachers. During COVID-19, 250 million children and young people have been kicked out of the school system. How we are going to promote collaborative approach when you are facing so many dysfunctionalities? I think we need to organize, reshape our minds, identify what are the strategic assets, and allow me to tell you, Nancy, we cannot continue to be the dark continent.
Right.
We cannot. Sorry, we cannot. No. Energy, energy, energy. How I'm going to as a policymaker, how I'm going to extend collaboration with a remote community, making that remote community resilient to attempts to terrorism if it doesn't have electricity, water, education, and health. Ask me, I don't know.
Very, very, very crucial questions, because they are the practical questions. And Minister Vera Songwei, if I can ask you to pick up on that and tell us how you are thinking about some of those issues, because if we can use the parlance, the buck stops with you when it comes to many of these things. As a minister thinking from a very top level about these problems, do you have time for collaboration and integration with all the problems that you're trying to deal with?
Ok, non, je pense en fait que c'est ce qui s'est fait au niveau des gouvernements. Ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est que les gouvernements, notamment au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire, il y a une vision, il y a un projet de société que le président porte. Parce que lorsqu'on parle de leadership, il est important de dire qu'il est bon aussi d'avoir un leader qui soit à la tête d'un pays, voilà, qui a une vision, qui a un projet de société pour améliorer les conditions de vie de ces populations. au-delà de cette vision, il faut pouvoir décliner en fait ce projet de société en programme de gouvernement et en plan d'action. Et c'est ce que nous faisons ici en fait. Parce que le leader, c'est qui? Le leader, c'est celui qui apporte le bonheur à ses populations. Le leader, c'est celui qui crée des écoles, celui qui crée des centres de santé, qui construit des routes, qui donne de l'énergie, qui donne de la télécommunication à ses populations. Le leader, c'est celui qui renforce les capacités de ces jeunes. L'Afrique, le continent africain, c'est plus de 75% des jeunes. Et le défi des Africains, c'est quoi aujourd'hui exactement? C'est créer de la valeur, c'est créer de l'emploi pour ces milliers de jeunes. Donc, ça veut dire qu'il faut repenser l'éducation, orienter en fait les jeunes vers la science et la technologie, ne plus favoriser les enseignements d'ordre général, promouvoir la formation professionnelle. Parce que c'est cela les défis aujourd'hui des gouvernements africains et du continent africain. Et ce qu'il faut noter également, il ne faut pas avoir le complexe de collaborer avec l'extérieur. Nous sommes dans un village planétaire. Des pays avant nous ont bénéficié de plans Marshall, etc., pour se développer. Donc, c'est normal que l'Afrique, je veux dire, dans le cadre de ses relations multilatérales ou bilatérales, collabore avec des institutions internationales, tout en comptant sur elle-même, parce qu'en sachant que notre développement ne passera par notre croissance inclusive. C'est pour cela qu'on dit aujourd'hui en termes de priorité, il faut transformer structurellement nos économies en transformant nos matières premières. Parce qu'un pays comme la Côte d'Ivoire, qui est un pays très agricole, premier producteur mondial de cacao, d'anacarde, également d'EVA, etc., on a un niveau de taux de transformation de nos produits qui n'est pas encore l'objectif que nous souhaitons. Donc, je pense qu'il y a des axes comme ça sur lesquels il faut travailler en construisant ce grand ensemble que nous voulons à travers nos communautés économiques régionales et également à travers la ZLECAf qui se met en place. Vous savez, aujourd'hui, la volonté des Africains a été, je vais dire, exprimée à travers la vitesse avec laquelle les pays africains ont signé la ZLECAf. On n'a jamais vu ça depuis 60 ans. En moins de 2 ans, 54 pays ont signé le traité portant sur la ZLECAf. Un an après, il y a au moins 35 pays qui ont ratifié pour le traité de la ZLECAf. Ça montre que la volonté est claire. Maintenant, il faut pouvoir accompagner ce processus-là. Au-delà des échanges commerciaux, mais il faut qu'on puisse tenir les grands défis liés à l'agenda 2063, c'est-à-dire avoir l'Afrique que nous voulons. Mais l'Afrique que nous voulons, il est multicritère. Il faut investir dans l'agriculture, il faut investir dans les infrastructures, il faut investir, il faut régler les problèmes financiers en termes de monnaie entre les différents pays. Il faut avancer sur tous ces chantiers, promouvoir le commerce électronique, etc. Promouvoir la science et la technologie, comme je l'ai indiqué. Donc, il y a des axes pour nous qui sont prioritaires pour que les choses puissent aller de l'avant. Mais parallèlement à cela, il faut promouvoir la bonne gouvernance. Un pays comme la Côte d'Ivoire, on a une haute autorité en charge de la bonne gouvernance. Et en plus de cela, le président de la République a créé un ministère en charge de la lutte contre la corruption. Et au-delà de la création des structures, il y a des sanctions qui sont faites. Il y a des audits qui sont faits dans les différentes entités. Et on a un dispositif également de lutte contre le blanchiment des capitaux. Et on n'a pas le choix, d'autant plus que juste chez nos voisins, au Mali, au Burkina, comme vous le savez, il y a toute cette menace terroriste. Et on doit être très vigilant par rapport à la circulation des flux illicites pour ne pas alimenter en fait la guerre contre, pour ne pas alimenter le terrorisme. Donc tout ça, ce sont des défis que nous avons. Et moi, je pense qu'on doit continuer, on doit être optimiste. Et on doit continuer de travailler. Et la société civile et le secteur privé africain doivent se mobiliser pour prendre leur part dans les plans de développement qui sont conçus par leurs États. C'est ce que nous recommandons. Raison pour laquelle ici en Côte d'Ivoire, nous travaillons à promouvoir les champions nationaux pour que la croissance soit inclusive et pour qu'on puisse se donner des chances d'intégrer dans le tissu socio-économique tous ces jeunes qui sortent et en promouvant également l'entrepreneuriat. Voici ce à quoi nous...
So much, Minister.
Voilà un peu.
Thank you. I'm just going to jump in because I want to bring Thank you. I want to bring Tony in on that point. You've given us a very good sort of macro view of some of the issues you're thinking about. And, you know, Mariel and Edwin have touched on some of the micro issues. But Tony, you sort of sit between both, and your business is affected by both. I wonder what your thoughts are on how the public and private sector work together, particularly on this point of productive employment. That is such a huge issue for Africa. It is maybe one of the biggest issues that we have, is how we get our people into fulfilling, dignified employment. When you think about that, is that something you have a regional lens for, or something you think about beyond your own borders?
Let's look at it from 2 points of view. First of all, good jobs are in good sectors and good areas of the economy. We just heard Vera in the previous session talk about coltan and the value addition to coltan, which is going on outside the Congo. Those are all good career jobs going away with the value addition elsewhere. Currently, there is a search for lithium all over West Africa, and lithium deals are being signed as we speak. But based on the existing laws in the mining industry across West Africa, we are going to be left with the old model of royalties and little bits and pieces here, and the value addition won't take place. And this is where areas like mining, AfCFTA should be coming in by now and saying, these are continent-wide rules, suggestions for reforming your mining law. And time is of the essence. The world is not waiting for Africa to get our act together. So we need to do these things immediately. And if we don't do so, it is not just money which is going away, it's the kind of jobs we are talking about in whole sectors which are going away. At the individual company level, the tendency is, yes, we will train our people, we will make sure they get the top jobs. But honestly, until you get whole sectors localized, even in manufacturing, if you do not have manufacturing vertically integrated from iron and steel or bauxites and alumina to the vehicles or whatever you do with the iron and steel or the aluminum, you still will not get the kind of jobs that we seek. And without manufacturing, and manufacturing across the whole sector, the whole value chain, Africa will not get those jobs. And to do so, we need to start now and immediately.
That's a very sobering point there. And Edwin, I know you've made some very good points earlier about the things that Africa needs to do in terms of external relations and how those are managed. But internally, what are the areas that, like Tony is saying, we actually need to get our act together? There's a saying that, don't wear a grass skirt don't stand near a goat if you're wearing a grass skirt. So there are areas where we have to say, look, we are not well organized in this area. We need to do better. What are some of those that you can see?
Thank you. I think some of them have been already mentioned in the previous panel. Number one is, like Tony talked about right now, 22 million jobs have to be created every year to absorb the people who will get into the job market. And that is not going to come from anything else other than from improving the value addition as has been highlighted. But I want to talk about it from the point of view of, yes, we need to cooperate with the world because we need these investments to come in. We need to crowd in the private sector. But the market systems as we have them right now, like Christine mentioned earlier, is not well developed. The structural system for the businesses to operate, including some of the policies that Tony mentioned, are not fully functional yet. And some of them require some massive injection of funds, which the governments don't also have. And as such, we still need to collaborate they collaborate on the terms that will benefit Africa. And I think it's not even about the lack of ideas. It's about identifying where those structural barriers are and then coming together as Africa. Vera made the example for vaccines. We came together, the African Medical Supply Platform, we came together and we got a deal, right? Or we are getting deals in that sense. We should recognize that it is now time to come together, because if we leave ourselves to the outside world, if we come in fragments and piecemeal, small economies, we would always get a raw deal from the rest of the world. So that is the first thing. It's about coming together. The CFTA presents that opportunity. So everything we can do right now, every policy barrier that needs to be knocked down to ensure that the CFTA works and that it starts and that it begins to bring in or crowd in the benefits that we're talking about. These are the things we need to begin to make sure they operationalize right now. So CFTA is one, but let's also look at the green job sector, energy and agriculture. I think the case has been made for the first time. We are currently we own the major raw materials for green energy. This is hot cake. This is the whole world is after this. If we don't get it now, we would lose an opportunity. And I think the steps that have been taken right now are those steps we want to talk about. Like Vera mentioned, I really was excited when Vera made the case about coltan. These are the same things we need to put across. Even solar energy, we should be exporting, because Africa is like the sun belt of the world, right? We should be harnessing that. We should be jumping ahead and exporting solar energy, because as the world is moving away from fossil fuels, we should be the ones bringing creating this green energy and even selling to the world. So this is an opportunity we have to get our acts together, put real policies in place that will enable us harness the potential for green energy and green jobs for the many young people that are coming to the job market. I mean, I know we are out of time, but I just wanted to quickly highlight those two areas of energy and agriculture, and then we'll be able to harness, and get our acts together, and then we can bargain with the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. Your own energy is quite infectious, and I think you've got us all charged up. I'll have to wrap it up now, but just a really quick one from you, Mariel. And I'm wondering about, Tony said something earlier. He said sometimes there's a mentality of a leader as a strong man when it comes to the African context. When you look at your generation, is there a realignment of what leadership means?
I think definitely there is a very strong realignment as to what leadership means, but we could actually even consider, why is it that we have so many young people who are not satisfied by the current status quo on political leadership and how economies are being governed, but none of them are willing to vie. I think definitely there is a huge gap and even commitment from the leaders to make sure we are grooming enough people to come into these sectors to transform them, so that when we are committing to walking this journey as young people to building a new Africa, we are committing to systems that work. And I want to reiterate that the status quo can no longer be the one thing that we are constantly committing to. You have local leadership not even having qualified people to govern. Why is it that young people are being sidelined and not enough is going towards truly transforming our political engagement?
Mm-hmm. And it all comes back to that word transformation, doesn't it? Which is exactly what this whole event is all about. Thank you very much, Mariel. I think that gives us a lot to think about as we end what the future looks like. The pandemic has radically changed the world, but the actions we take today will define our generation and those to come. And I like what they say, that in moments like these of crisis, those who lack wisdom will build walls, but those who are wise will build bridges, which is something I feel that we've done today. And thank you so much for your assistance with that, the whole panel. It's been wonderful to have you. I'll wrap it off now, but I'm told that we are able to have the privilege of listening to a few more of our emerging leadership voices. So over to them.
Hello, I'm Ifeomuna, the co-founder and co-CEO of Nourishing Africa, a digital platform aimed at equipping and connecting agri-food entrepreneurs across Africa. Nourishing Africa has built a virtual community of over 55,000 agri-food entrepreneurs and enthusiasts across our various platforms and channels, where they connect directly with one another and gain access to opportunities, including funding, data, learning resources, events, technology, talent, inputs, and other resources and tools that they need to scale their businesses. Our mission is to drive the profitable and sustainable growth of the agriculture and food landscape by attracting, empowering, equipping, connecting, and celebrating over 1 million dynamic and innovative young agri-food entrepreneurs. And all that we do is with the vision of a flourishing and just food ecosystem that leverages ag tech and digital innovation and is driven by these vibrant entrepreneurs who will see our continent be food secure and eventually net exporters of food to the world by 2050. So as you can see, tech and innovation is integral to what we do. For us, a more integrated Africa is a game changer. Not only would it allow for greater, more tangible collaboration and partnerships between SMEs across the continent, but it will spark further innovation because these young entrepreneurs are no longer going to be stifled by red tape when thinking of new ways to fix decade-old problems within our sector. An integrated Africa would lead to more meaningful jobs across the entire value chain as businesses are now able to trade and grow. A more integrated Africa is the way forward for us to truly realize our vision of being food secure and net exporters to the world. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Wieba Boer, and I'm the CEO of All On, which is an off-grid energy investment company set up by Shell to address the off-grid energy problem in Nigeria. As many of you know, Nigeria is the energy access poverty capital of the world with over 100 million people that are either off the grid or have bad grid. We basically make up 1/6 of the total off-grid population in Africa. And so obviously addressing this problem in Nigeria is a huge deal. In All On, we basically are impact investors. We invest directly in businesses that are delivering clean energy to low-income communities and small businesses. We also invest through funds. We also have an All On Hub that is funded by the Rockefeller Foundation to provide non-financial technical support to businesses in this space. And then finally, we have a team that does grants and works on advocacy to help create an enabling environment for the sector. Now, while we are just focused on Nigeria, we also know that this sector has a huge potential across Africa. And if there was alignment in energy policy and regulations across Africa, many of the companies we invest in would be able to grow much faster across the continent rather than having to sort of redesign their business model for every country. But in addition, with the opening up of the markets in Africa and across borders, there's also an opportunity, a multi-billion-dollar opportunity for if we, for example, in Nigeria, start manufacturing equipment for the off-grid space and actually then are able to sell it freely across Africa. These panels you see behind me that are powering our office here in Lagos are actually made in Nigeria. And imagine how much bigger their market could be if it wasn't just Nigeria they had to sell to, but they could sell to the entire ECOWAS region and beyond. So energy access is a massive problem in Africa, but if we work together and integrate, I think there's a way that we can solve it quite quickly together.
I am Manuela Pachuto Mulondo from Uganda. I'm a 2017 Mandela Washington Fellow, a 2018 Obama Leader, a workplace gender equality advocate, the president of the Early Years Foundation of Uganda, and the CEO and founder of The Cradle. The Cradle is a 24-hour childcare and lactation service designed for the workplace. We partner with governments, organizations, businesses, families, and mothers to set up spaces for childcare and lactation at the workplace. Our dream is an Africa where women are free to maximize their full potential and yet still enjoy raising Africa's human capital. An integrated Africa is one that allows the Cradle to spread this model across Africa, so that in a continent where the sole responsibility of unpaid care work, including childcare, can be lifted off of women, and we can have more women in places of power and influence, and together change the trajectory of Africa's destiny.
Hello everyone, my name is Joshua Amfonsen, and I'm the founder of Green Africa Youth Organization, an organization that works together with young people in communities to take action on climate change. And I'm very happy to be talking at the Africa Transformation Forum 2021. As you would know, climate change is devastating our continent. From food insecurity to constant floods and droughts, this is really putting particularly women and children to a huge disadvantage while robbing away the future of young people. What my organization is doing is to work with young people by giving them skills, training them, empowering them to take action locally. For example, in the Adansi South community in Ghana, we are working with young people to collate organic waste from market spaces, convert that into compost fertilizer to support organic farming. We are also supporting farmers to practice more climate-smart agriculture and also to convert agricultural waste into charcoal briquettes, which prevents deforestation and also allow women to have smokeless and clean charcoal for cooking. This is improving their health and supporting them in their livelihood. At the same time, these projects are providing jobs, and so far we've been able to provide employment and job opportunities to over 90 young people just in the year 2020. In northern Ghana and also in Mali, where we have our projects, we are also supporting with waste management solutions and supporting young people and young entrepreneurs to convert waste into useful resources. We are having our Tree for Biodiversity project, which supports agroforestry and agroecology, which is very important for the food systems in Africa. All these are very important initiatives which can be scaled across Africa if Africa had a strong unity and a strong way of communicating, engaging, and working together as a continent. We are hoping that by building a stronger regulatory framework across the continent, a stronger union across the continent, and sharing these solutions, projects like this will be able to replicate it across the continent. I'm very happy that ACET and Africa Transformation Forum 2021 has also given space for climate change to be a leading topic. With your support and with the support of all the development actors and all governments and young people who are taking action on climate, I believe and I hope that we can make Africa very resilient and adapt to the impacts of climate change. Thank you.
I think Mariel was absolutely right. It's fantastic to see those new leaders, those emerging voices come forward and remind us just how many good things are happening on the continent, just as Dolika said earlier. Well, to wrap things up, I would like to now introduce the Executive Vice President of the African Center for Economic Transformation. Please welcome Mavis Owusu-Gyamfi.
Thank you very much, Nancy. As you said, listening to young people always energizes me. On behalf of ACET and our partners, I'd like to start by offering a sincere thank you to all of you for joining us today. Your participation is what this forum is all about. Please allow me first to offer a note of appreciation and gratitude to our special guests. Your Excellencies, Vice President Mahamadou Bawumia of the Republic of Ghana, and Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, former President of Liberia and Distinguished Chair of the Transformation Leadership Panel. The Honorable Tito Mboweni, Finance Minister of the Republic of South Africa and Chair of the ACET Board. The Honorable Suleiman Diarra Subar, the Minister of Trade and Industry for the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire. UN Under Secretary General Christina Duarte, and all the distinguished members of the Transformation Leadership Panel and the Leaders at All Levels panel. Your time and your insights on these important issues today have made this a truly remarkable event. Ladies and gentlemen, we have touched on many pressing issues for Africa: jobs and education for our young people, innovation and technology for our development, climate and natural resources for our growth, good leadership at all levels, and most importantly, the need for us to collaborate to transform our continent. There were some common themes we heard from our leaders and participants over the last 2 hours that I'd like to highlight. The first is there is positive progress across the board in Africa, but the pace of change needs to be quickened. Secondly, there are examples of countries integrating to transform, but we need to accelerate and scale up these examples across the continent urgently. Time is of essence. We all heard our young people just now talk about their innovations. They need that platform for a market. Third, we can transform the challenges around jobs, climate, and innovation into opportunities by dealing with them together. There is a need for leadership and ownership at all levels to tackle our economic transformation challenges. We need leaders in government, in business, in civil society, and amongst ourselves as citizens. We are all leaders, and we must drive and own this agenda. And finally, it is important for Africa's partners to align behind a common economic transformation agenda. So the discussion today, you'll agree, has been excellent. We have much to carry forward. So I would urge everyone in the audience to download and read the ACET Integrating to Transform report. You can read it on the ACET website, and you have a choice. You can either read the full transformation report, if like me, you like reading big reports, or you can just read the overview or a short summary of priority actions. There is also a fantastic visual summary of charts and infographics that we would recommend you share with others if you would like to present the report in other fora. We are proud of our report, but we know it's just a starting point. Our ambition is for this report to become a catalyst for action. This is why I'm asking all of you to read it and identify which elements you as an individual and your government or company or organization can champion or implement. We need to work together to transform Africa. And at ACET, we believe implementation of the recommendations in this report will contribute to Africa's transformation agenda. Today's discussion was a fantastic start, but it's just a start. We must now build on it to get Africa's transformation back on track. You heard earlier from John that we are off track. We need to get back on track. We need to ensure that Africa's build forward plans are inclusive and equitable, and that they put into action the recommendations for advancing integration. This will ensure we realize the ambitions we have set for ourselves in Agenda 2063. But we all know it's easy to attend such an event and then move on. But we need to galvanize action. And to do this, it is important to keep the conversation going. And that's why ACET is organizing a series of webinars around each of the main themes in the ATR. This will enable us to reconvene with policymakers, technical experts, young people, civil society, business, and our development partners to delve deeper into each of these issues. These deep dives will focus on how we transform the ATR recommendations into meaningful, actionable next steps. We will be sharing information on these soon. We expect to hold the next one on climate in October this year, in advance of COP26. And I am making a personal commitment to all of our young people. If you join us, it will not be tokenistic. We want to learn your experience and how we transform your experiences and your innovations as part of these meaningful actions. I'd also like to take a moment to bring everyone's attention to our forthcoming Africa Transformation Index. It is currently being finalized. Early data on our research inform the ATR, and we are so very excited that it will be released in the coming months. Before I close, I'd like to acknowledge my wonderful colleagues at ACET and all our outstanding partners who worked tirelessly on the ATR and today's ATF. There are too many of you to list, but you know who you are. My sincerest thanks to every single one of you. There is one person, though, that I would like to name and offer a heartfelt thank you to on behalf of everybody here today. Dr. K.Y. Amwako, without your vision, passion, and drive, we would not be here today. The ATR and ATF was your vision almost a decade ago, and we have just launched ACET's third ATR. KY, I know you don't like public acknowledgements, but you also brought me to ACET because I am independent-minded. So on behalf of every one of us, KY, and all the children of Africa who will benefit someday from economic transformation, our sincere thank you. This year, like most organizations, we had to pivot to something new and different for the ATF. But with over 600 registrations, it is obvious this platform is valuable to Africa and its partners. On behalf of ACET and our partners, I would like to thank TechChange for helping us move the ATF online, and to our excellent facilitators, Elena and Nancy, for keeping the show on the move. Ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to seeing all of you at the deep dives and the launch of the Africa Transformation Index. And I hope that we will get to meet a number of you in person and online at the next ATF in a couple of years. I strongly believe the energy and appetite for dialogue and action around economic transformation will only grow in the years ahead. And I hope you will join us in continuing to champion this important issue. We all know that if you take a single broom, you can just break it. But if you put it together, it becomes an effective tool for change. So let's work together to transform our beloved continent. Have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are, and please stay safe. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you so much, Mavis, for those inspiring words and just how much we have to look forward to in the coming years, working together, transforming the continent together, whether it's the government, the private sector, and importantly, the new generation of leaders. Thank you to all of you who have joined us, taken the time to engage with this very vital conversation, and of course, ways that we can move the continent forward. From me, Eleni Jarkos, thank you so much, and I hope to see you in person soon.